keep the pressure on. Keep making your voices heard. It does make a difference. It's incredible what a small number of people can do if they're motivated to make a difference. You're up against some big odds, but remember who won in Davy versus Goliath. So we can still win this thing. You're on the right side. You're on the common sense side. So again, I am grateful that you're out here, that you're involved in the process, and hopefully we'll have some good news on that. And we've got a little bit of movement on some concealed carry too. So you never know what we might be able to get done in Illinois as well.
What is happening right now on that?
What is the movement that's going on? There are 2 or 3 different bills that have been introduced that have actually been allowed to go to committee to have a hearing, which has not happened before. So we're at that point. As more and more evidence comes out, as more and more organizations and law enforcement groups come out and say this makes sense, it starts to gain more momentum. So,
have you personally had any involvement with that?
Have I involvement? Yes. I mean, I've always co-sponsored the legislation. It's always toughest in the House, and so the legislation is starting in the House. So we continue to work with our local House members and other like-minded individuals to stay supportive of this kind of legislation. So, and my guess is that within a very short period of time, Illinois will be the last state that doesn't have it. So, way back there.
Yes, sir. How do you see in the coming election up to and through 2012? What influence do you see the Tea Party and the NRA having on the coming election?
What influence will the Tea Party and NRA and others have in the upcoming election? Well, I think it can make a substantial impact, both locally and statewide. Because remember how many people show up and vote. Unfortunately, this last election, when only 49% of people chose to vote, that gave Quinn the win. If we had had 1% higher turnout, it would have been different. 1% of those outside of Chicago would have voted, 1% more,
only 3 counties, right?
We could have made a difference.
Yeah. You only took 3 counties, right?
Yeah. Brady won, outside of Chicago, Brady won by about 370,000 votes. Chicago, we lost by about 400. About 200 of those were probably legal, but but that's what a difference that kind of a election can make. Locally, we have school board races coming up that are going to have huge financial impact for those in Rockford for a long time to come. When you get less than 10% voter turnout, that means you may not be a huge group, but for every one of you with votes, that's worth 10 votes. So it does make a difference if you show up and vote in larger numbers, if you walk your districts, if you make your phone calls, do the things we have to do to get our voice heard. Stay involved and make sure you get your emails being sent out. That if you're not on our email list to keep up what we're doing, make sure you go to my website and sign up. If you're a Facebook buddy, thank you. We try to have a little fun on our Facebook. So for those of you who are illiterate, get on Facebook and join us. But get on our email list, and we'll keep you up to date on what we're fighting for in Springfield. So,
Dave, are you a representative of the Tea Party? Do you affiliate yourself with the Tea Party?
Do I affiliate with the Tea Party? Yes, I probably tell people that. And an NRA member, and a FOID card carrying.
I made one Tea Party meeting in Rockford. And at the meeting, they brought out that they thought that the NRA had made a deal with the Obama administration on the Elena Kagan nomination. And at that meeting, they stated that they did not support the NRA, that the Tea Party did. In being fair, they allowed me to come up and speak before them about that. I think there needs to be at least clarification in my head. Does the Tea Party support the NRA or not?
Of course.
Rockford,
Not of course.
well, I don't know what they're doing up
It's
in Rockford,
local. All Tea Parties are local.
but they should have the same principles.
And the question is, to the Tea Party and the NRA, do they support each other? And again, part of the issue with the Tea Party and with NRA is there's individuals that may have different views on different issues, but by and large, absolutely, they are strong believers in free enterprise, Second Amendment rights, common sense, smaller government, personal responsibility. So, do we always agree? No, I mean, I don't always agree with John Harmon. Sometimes he's wrong. But I think there is we can't let small differences separate what is important to us in getting our government back. So, if there are things that there may be little differences on, let's think about what's tying us together and how important it is that we get people that at least are in the same family, even though we may not always agree on the issue. So, all right, was there a question? Back there, was there a question? Maybe not anymore. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
What was the reasoning for Lisa Madigan to ask for the list of FOID? What was the reason? Do you know?
What was the reason for Madigan to do that? Well, first of all, somebody had requested it, and so they went to her for a legal opinion.
Well, I requested for her to do something about this Obamacare. And she said, well, I'm friends with Obama and those people in Chicago, so she don't do nothing. Somebody else says they want a list of all the FOIA members, and she flips and does something. What's the deal?
Yeah, the question is why does Lisa Madigan was requested to release this information, and why do other groups ask Lisa Madigan's office for information to be released and never get responded to, or they never pursue those issues? And again, obviously the reason is Madigan is going to be certainly partial to her views, and so not always right, but she pursues that. She went to court and supported the measure. So.
But what was the reason behind it? Why does she want this list? I mean, if she wants to know who's got a FOIA card, she can go to the state police and find out.
Yeah, why did she really want that list?
The Associated Press.
Associated Press,
right. The press wanted it, but she could have said no. She could have blocked it. She could have slowed it down, but she didn't. Why? She probably thought it would. She thinks it may embarrass or intimidate people that thought they didn't want to be on the list, or might keep them in the future from wanting to be on the list. It doesn't make sense to them. So, but I'm sure that's the reason. Thought it was political.
Why would you want to intimidate somebody that owns guns? I mean, intimidate a garbage collector or something like that. I mean, gee, you don't go out and intimidate somebody that has weapons.
If you're political, you do. Yeah.
Trying to dissuade them from getting a gun.
I have met the one guy that thinks this is a great idea. He's an ex-felon with a history of home invasion. He said this would be a great way for me to know if I need to go in heavy, or if I can go to this house when we're out there, get the guns, and then hit the other houses afterwards.
I think that's one of the reasons why the state police do not like that idea too, because clearly it gives those sophisticated criminals a good idea of more likelihood of who has a weapon and who doesn't have a weapon. So that's something, again, the reason why the state police do it. So. Yeah. Mark Sipes, Pat Fisher, meet outside the door there. With Dan. All right. Other questions?
What's happened in other states when they published the concealed carry in the picture? That's what I was trying to find, because there's been fights in other states as embarrassing people that have their legal permits as well.
Question is, what's happened in other states? I'm not familiar enough. I have enough trouble in Illinois, so I'm not really familiar unless anyone else is familiar with what other states have done.
In the state of Utah, I do concealed firearms training in the state of Utah, and they do not release that information to anybody
Utah doesn't release
They do
the
not
list.
share that information with anybody, period.
Neither does the state of Florida. I got
That's
a
their law.
concealed carry out of there, and I just got a letter saying they won't be releasing my information.
Neither does Florida, so we hear two states, do I hear three? Do I hear three states?
Is this Lisa Madigan's way of seeing concealed carry, or maybe some gun legislation that she didn't like? And is this her way of saying, hey, you know what, you guys better stop this, I'm going to put a little roadblock in the way by revealing everybody's name and number? Is that her motivation, maybe?
Is Lisa Madigan's motivation to try to slow down concealed carry, because that will be the next list that would come out and try to intimidate people? You know, no one's really sure what the reasons are why they do what they do. It doesn't always make sense. I don't know why they think that it would intimidate people from wanting to become gun owners or stop people in the future from getting a FOID card. Doesn't make sense, but again, we're not dealing with a common sense government, so, yeah.
Have you ever brought up, like, the rationality with them? Why aren't we publishing names of people who have actually been arrested for concealing a firearm that they shouldn't own, or concealing a firearm, period, versus citizens who are following the law?
The question is, why don't we just, are there lists that we can give out of those who are breaking the law, or people have misused?
If we're going to embarrass somebody, why not? People who are
Because that violates their rights that they don't want to violate, but they'll violate ours.
Yeah.
That's what they'll say.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
To my knowledge, the state of Illinois is the only state that requires a FOID card. If that's the case, and it appears that our government is going to abuse that law by publishing a list of all of us, wouldn't this be time right now to start to appeal, or to repeal the FOID card?
Question is this a good time to repeal the FOID cards, and other states don't do that as well? So, sure. I mean, that's been a question that's been raised all along. Why do they go through this process? Because again, who follows the law to go through the steps to get a FOID card? Not the criminals, not the
Right
gang
now,
members.
we're experiencing exactly what we objected to begin with. All of us are honest citizens. We all have FOID cards. We've all been checked out. Now, with that in mind, we've proved that we're honest citizens. She is proving that they're dishonest by trying to publish a list of all of our names.
Yeah, the comment was that they're publishing the list. They want to publish a list of all these names, even though in the beginning, when these concerns were raised when they started the FOID card, it was promised that that would never happen, that wasn't the purpose of it, and I'm just shocked that government would change their mind on something and do something that they originally promised. I know most of you are.
My understanding is how they're justifying this is AP, the press came to Lisa and said, this is a public information application and it should be hence listed, and but then again, there's public information when you go to get food stamps. You have to give public information. You have to put that down. I'd like to know my neighbor with 3 cars in the driveway if they're getting food stamps. You know what I mean? It's embarrassing, and it's but that was my understanding. It was legally, from the legal standpoint, it was a public application in which, in the Freedom of Act information, AP went in and said, well, it's public, it's Freedom of the Act, we want it.
The state police even denied that there was even a request made. The state police came back and said, we never received that request.
Right. The question was, the state police officially said they've never received even a request. So why did AP go right to the Attorney General's office to get an opinion? And if they're going to release those lists, why don't they release all the other private lists that we keep track of organizations, of people who are getting other state benefits?
Great question. So,
you're running a little low. Okay, way back here.
I just want to see if this is your opinion. I think they want the list of FOID cards so they can just come in and say, well, they got guns, we're going to long arm them, we're going to take the guns. I mean, what do you think about that?
It happened in Katrina.
Well, the question was, is they want to hold that list so they can have a better opportunity to come and work off that list, that law enforcement can come and help confiscate. But the problem is that law enforcement already has that list, so they already have access to that. So I don't see that as being the reason. I just think it was just a silly political move that was a mistake. And the good news is that it did help energize people to get more involved. And this is a small step from what government would like to do to you. And this should be a wake-up call that this is a, you know, they keep testing the water. They put their toes in the water just to see how far they can go to take rights away. And if they can get this one, then they can go a little bit further the next time and a little bit further. They're smart enough to understand that you don't go from A to C, you got to go to A to B to C. And so that's why when people say, you know, is this really that big of a deal? It is, because it's these baby steps that they try to take, and it's important that we draw the line in the sand with this issue, because after this will come the next issue. So, all righty, any other?
I got a question. Seems like Obama, he's flagrantly violating the Constitution. Is there any talks in the Senate or the House about impeaching him? Let's cut to the chase.
Yeah. Again, I have enough problems dealing in the state with Quinn, but clearly there is the issues that are going on at the federal level, and what's being done, even being, obviously, some of the Democratic congressmen are the most vocal in talking about Obama exceeding his rights. Wish these same Democrats would have been that vocal when it came to Obamacare. So
They hadn't read it yet.
they haven't read it yet. Yeah, they still haven't read it.
They're adding to it.
We're feeling it here in Illinois, that's for sure. Yeah.
Jay Leno said something about impeaching Obama. He said there's two words, Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. If you impeach Obama, you get Biden. So there's a treat.
Just won't tell him, he won't figure it out for a couple of years.
He won't even know.
Send him to Russia.
All right.
Senator?
Okay, question back here?
Back here.
Somebody had one?
Right here.
Back thing is
Yeah. So didn't we allow for recall of public officials in Illinois this past election cycle?
Yes, recall. Didn't we? The question was, didn't we allow for recall? Didn't we allow for recall?
You were doing okay. You just filled in and out.
How's this? Now I feel really important. The question was, didn't we pass legislation for recall this last year? I know you might be surprised, but in an election year, they passed legislation calling for recall, but it was done in a nice way, so it made for a good soundbite. But if you look at the legislation, the way the Democrats passed it just before the election, it takes about 3 years to go through the steps of recall. So you would have to commit some act enough to be able to implement recall in your first 6 months of office. Otherwise, the time it takes to complete the recall, the person already would have been up for election and done again. So,
Take Democrat members of the state legislature from both houses to sign the paper.
That's right.
and it takes Democrats to sign it. So it was strictly, we don't have real recall. It was really, it was passed so they could send out a press release that they wanted a recall. It was done in a response to Blagojevich from the same leaders that supported Blagojevich and co-chaired his re-election even after these indictments were coming down. So like many pieces of legislation, they're very smart. They pass things that sound good in the media and to the general public. It sounds like it's good government, but if you actually read the fine print, it's very limiting. So
Can it be amended?
Oh, it can be amended, but
Put
again,
some
the
meat
problem
behind
is
it.
the same
With all
people.
the stuff that's going on in this state with taxation, the disregard for pretty much all our rights and our opinions, can't you begin to put some meat behind this to speed it up and get rid of these guys?
Can we put some muscle behind it and try to change that? Well, again, the problem is people who are leading the state now are the ones who are causing the problems, and they're the ones who will block any legislation and or would veto any legislation that would be passed. And even worse yet is because we were not able to get enough signatures to put fair map on the ballots, you are about to see in about 2 months now, by the middle of May, you're about to see new maps being drawn. And in Illinois, unlike other states, the legislative and the congressional district maps are drawn by two people, Mike Madigan and John Cullerton from Chicago. They get to decide who represents you, and they're going to be drawing the maps for the legislators and for the congressmen, and they're going to unveil it about an hour before the legislature votes on it. It'll be late at night. They'll unveil it. There'll be a quick vote, and they're going to gerrymander these districts. We'll lose at least 3 congressional or Republican congressmen will be wiped out with this map, and who knows what else they're going to do. We're going to try to put fair map on the ballot again in 2012. There is nothing that's more important to the state of Illinois than getting the signatures necessary to put fair map on the ballot for 2012. That won't change the remapping that takes place for 2012, but if we get enough signatures and put the question on the ballot in 2012, that would force the state to do another map in 2016. And that map would be drawn by an unbiased computer system that would draw it compact and contiguous, and it wouldn't be politically gerrymandered like other states do. So we could have 4 more rough years from 2012 to 2016 because we didn't get enough signatures. If we can get enough signatures in 2012, which is about, I think, 300,000 or something signatures, then we can change the remapping for 2016. So I'm not sure what the number, how many things. So you'll get more information of that coming out soon, but that is crucial that we get that on the ballot in 2012.
What if it was $100 for a year or two, and you get your concealed carry permit with that? How much money could the state make there? Would that be a way to sell it?
Now, the question was, if you put a higher fee on your FOID card, or put a higher fee on to be able to be allowed to have concealed carry. And I guess the issue is twofold. One is, I don't think there's any price you can put on there that would change the mind of the current leadership in Springfield to allow this to happen. Second, when you're talking about raising money, $100 a pop, or even if you're raising a few million, this is a government that is spending a little over $150 million a day in Springfield. So raising a few $1 million, unfortunately, is not enough to make that change. So
you guys are going that way. I'm trying to go this way.
It's certainly a good idea. Okay, other questions you have?
Going back to the census situation and the loss of representatives, a lot of that, there's a lot of illegal states. They're not honest people. They come into our state illegally, then they don't pay their fair share of taxes. A lot of them I've been seeing lately they don't even pay no taxes. That's why they got extra money to send back home. When are we going to send them back home?
Yeah, the question was about with the census and the number of illegals that were counted in the census, and that continues to be a problem. We have legislation that we've introduced this year. Again, I doubt it's going to go anywhere. That increases penalties for driving without a license, driving without insurance. But again, a lot of this legislation ends up being blocked by these same leaders who have been the holdup in the past. And so that's why it's so important that we make some changes in who we elect, because no matter how good these ideas are, we can introduce them, but they don't go anywhere when you have the leadership all coming out of Chicago right now that continues to block common sense reforms. So another reason why we got to have fair map to change the power of who controls this state. You know, with the census coming out, Chicago now only represents about 18% of the state's population, yet they control the entire state government. The governor's office, the Senate, the House, the Attorney General's office, the Secretary of State's office, the Supreme Court, everything is being controlled out of Chicago. And with redistricting, it's my understanding is that Chicago will have at least 30% of the legislators will come out of Chicago, even though they're 18% of the population. So, yeah.
Yes, sir. Senator, thank you for what you do. I'm Chuck Marsden, we're the Illinois Tea Party. Concerning this FOID card thing, I think April 15th, when we march on Springfield, we should all burn our FOID cards. They are unconstitutional.
I'd rather burn my bra.
Nobody has to have them but us and people.
I'll second that. Oh, thank you.
I say we burn our FOID cards while we're down there and tell the governor to give us the right to carry. It's our constitutional right to do so.
And the question is when you come down on the 15th, and I hope many of you do that. It was great to see such a great crowd that came down for the iGold and the NRA group that came down. It was great to see. For those who are coming down on the 15th, and I hope many of you can take a little time to come down there. It does make a difference. The question was, do you go down there and burn your FOID cards because it's really not something that is constitutional. So, I guess the question of what's constitutional or not is determined by the courts who have decided what is and what isn't. In this case, in Illinois courts have said it is. So we have to abide by that until we can change it. So, all right. Other questions? Anything else? Yeah, back here. Yeah, how come the FOID card has not been stricken down after all these years? Again, you have to look at the makeup of the Illinois courts, and it goes to the Illinois Supreme Court. I'm not a lawyer to know how they can challenge it to go to the federal court, but again, the makeup of the Illinois Supreme Court continues to be a problem because they control the courts. So, one more thing that we can change. Yeah.
President Obama just spent 2 weeks down in Brazil to issue a Brazilian company a deep water drilling permit in United States waters. Is there anything the Senate or Congress can do to make President Obama say, no, look America first? Create jobs for Americans?
Yeah.
Yeah, the question was about, and I don't know why there wasn't a lot more outrage, the idea of the president going down to Brazil and saying, you know what, we want to help you do more drilling for oil. We want to give you a lot more jobs so you can produce oil and sell it to us. It's incredible. This whole thing, our whole economy can be turned around, our jobs can be turned around. If we would do just domestic production of oil, we would be creating so many jobs, manufacturing jobs, as well as keeping the oil here. It's such common sense, and it's so frustrating when we see what Washington is doing. We want to create jobs and lessen our dependence. We've got more than enough oil here. You're not going to turn the economy around on wind or on solar. Ask Spain and Portugal and Italy and every other country that's going bankrupt trying to go green. These things don't work. And until they can come up with something that does work, oil is still rules. And it's very frustrating that Washington continues to stonewall what would be a lot of jobs. There are a lot of manufacturing jobs right here in Rockford that are tied to the oil industry, making those parts. And so can you imagine what would happen if we can increase that oil production? So we're going to keep trying to push Washington to do that. Yeah.
I can't believe you didn't hear me. I was so outraged when I saw that with Obama. You still haven't answered though. What can we do?
Well, what you do is continue to write letters to the editor, continue to make your phone calls to your congressmen and to your U.S. senators, and those are really, and you can contact, you can certainly contact the president's office as well, but clearly, writing letters to the editor, it is interesting how many leaders in Springfield and in Washington read the newspapers, look at the letters to editor to try to get a feel for where the public is on issues. So writing letters clearly make a difference. So writing letters, making your phone calls, all adds up because it affects public opinion. So way back here.
Don't mention the word gun.
Yeah, don't mention gun because the paper may be screening some of those. But I'm talking about the jobs issue, the oil issues, keeping jobs here, those types of letters. And yes, when you write your letters, you can privately say what makes you feel better, but when you write your letters, remember the audience who it goes to, and we have to get baby steps in our wins. So, yeah.
On several different occasions, I have written in response to some certain legislation that I didn't want to see happen, illegal immigration, any number of those issues, to Durbin. And I get back to some generic, nondescript, generic letter, thank you for contacting our office, blah, blah, and that's it, nothing. But if I send it to, and then also when Roland Burris was in Barack's, same thing. Not that I'm a big fan of who is currently in, but as a Mark Kirk. I did at least get a nice, lengthy response back from him, and I continue to get correspondence from him on issues. But Durbin has got to go. This guy.
The question was when you write Durbin, what happens? And you just get a form letter back. That's true with many of them, but they do keep a scorecard. It's interesting when you see a lot of these leaders that aren't very principled. They put their finger in the air, and depending which way the political winds are blowing, all of a sudden they can become a little more conservative for a while, and then go back to where they are. So even though you just get a form letter back, and you may not change their opinion, when they start getting enough letters and they see the wind changing on things like domestic production of oil, those are areas that you can at least lessen their opposition when they see poll numbers changing, and that may ease up some. And that's why the approach on the oil is keep our jobs here, lessen our dependence, until they can come up with a better idea. We should be continuing to use oil because oil still is king, and so we ought to be continuing to expand oil production here in this country and not giving money away to other countries to develop oil to sell it back to us. It just makes no sense at all. But that's the kind of word you get out. That's the kind of thing that is common sense. You don't have to be a Tea Party person or an NRA person or a conservative Republican to say that makes sense. So we just need the public to understand that how important domestic production is, not just from an oil standpoint, but from a jobs standpoint. How many jobs are created in the production of that? Because when you build those rigs, when you build those things, that creates a lot, not just construction jobs, but all those parts have to be manufactured. Many of those parts, again, right here in Rockford. So,
is it true this morning, Senator, I read that Caterpillar's leaving Illinois?
Question was about Caterpillar's letter. And we've had a problem with Caterpillar the last few years because of Illinois' anti-jobs philosophy, and even with the passage of Obamacare and what it could do to companies like Caterpillar, that they have expanded their company outside of Illinois, and they've expanded some of it outside the country. So there was a letter that was sent to the governor saying, you know what, we're getting a lot of inquiries from other states and a lot of offers to come there. And so I don't see them moving yet. But the question is where they are expanding. You know, Illinois loses more jobs to Indiana than we do to China.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. So this is a much more of an Illinois problem than it is a world problem. We have a governor in the state that just doesn't understand that businesses have to compete with other states and other countries, and we have to become more jobs friendly. Employers aren't the bad guys. Employers employ people who pay taxes.
My son works at Fat Wallet. They're gone.
Fat Wallet is another one. Very disappointing and a stupid. You know, we warned Quinn what would happen if he signed that legislation. I stood up on the Senate floor and tried to explain this doesn't make sense. You're not going to collect $1 more in taxes. Regardless of what you think on internet taxes and whether or not there should be equality of taxation, whether you buy it locally at a store that's invested in bricks and mortar or you buy it online, should there be an equal sales tax? That's a whole separate issue. This issue doesn't change that, unfortunately. Only Washington can change that law. All this says is that any company that links somebody to either Amazon or to Overstock or to some company that doesn't collect sales tax, that then that's the nexus to require those companies to pay taxes. So what happens is they just say, okay, we're not going to allow anybody to link to our sites. And so companies like Fat Wallet and others, a couple thousand jobs in Illinois are now lost, and still Illinois is not going to collect one dime in sales tax. We warned them, and it's like, oh well, you know, it's unfortunate. That's a good company that's lost, that did a lot of charitable work, did a lot of, was a good corporate neighbor that we've lost. And again, we're not going to collect a dime more in taxes.
Can you explain to me how GE gets away with paying no federal taxes? I'm just still baffled on that.
How does GE get away without paying taxes? Well, you'd be the largest contributor to the president, I guess. Yeah. There's a number of companies that get away with that, but it is something when you get guys like John Harmon who pay more taxes than GE, we have a real problem. It's a fairness issue, and they get these creative loopholes and get these forward depreciation things involving their wind work, and that's the kind of thing that the federal government needs to look at changing. Remember, it was even Ronald Reagan, a former GE guy, who said that it's ridiculous that these big corporations are finding loopholes to get around paying taxes. So either eliminate taxes for businesses altogether, of which the United States has got the highest corporate tax rate of any country for business. Either eliminate it or make it fair so these large mega corporations, who are especially hiding a lot of their assets overseas, close those loopholes and make them pay their fair shares.
One other thing about GE while we're on the subject, I just want to collaborate. I read something a couple of years ago that they were convicted basically of the same thing that Enron was, cooking the books. Had to pay a $50 billion fine in court, but then received $132 billion in low-interest loans from the taxpayers from Obama, was made an economic advisor. Is that true?
Yeah, and the issue was about, didn't GE pay some fines in the past for cooking their books? Which I think the answer was yes, they agreed to a settlement and paid a fine. We have, unfortunately, a lot of that goes on. It's unfortunate. I've always found it interesting that if some person, not that it's right, but if some person, breaks into a home or robs a store, they get 10, 15 years. But you commit some of this white-collar crime, and you pay a little fine, even though you've ripped off taxpayers to the tune of millions of dollars, and we never make these people pay anything. Welfare fraud, Medicaid fraud. These people ought to be in prison to send a message that you can't rip off the state. But we continue to let them off, unfortunately. So,
flat tax.
yeah, certainly going to a flat tax, or a consumption tax or something would be, would certainly be an easier system, but again, all we can do is hope for some baby steps, to try to correct, what's in there. The good news is GE's had some problems with quality of work in China, and they're moving some jobs back here, and Rockford is benefiting from some of that. As you know, they are expanding their operation on Riverside, their old location, so they're bringing some work back here, which is good. That's just a series of companies that have had problems with quality of work being done over there. And what part of communist China don't people in Washington understand? When you hear stuff about how they even shut down cell phones and Facebook and the internet, and how they still control everything over there, and they don't abide by any intellectual property laws. So why do we keep doing business with a country that continues to steal our patents, and we do nothing about it? Makes no sense again, but follow the money, I guess, is what you have to do. So.
Which candidate do you like in 2012?
Which candidate do I like in 2012? Two things we have to keep in mind when we look for the upcoming elections. Number one is, who do we like? And number two, who can win? You know, sometimes we make the mistake of wanting that, that perfect candidate, understanding that, unfortunately, we're in a state that is not necessarily as conducive, and we have a lot of odds against us. So we need to be smart enough and make sure that we don't eat our own in this upcoming elections, because we're not going to have the money that the other side has. So, so I don't know who is going to be best, but keep in mind we need to look at who is the strongest candidate in November, not who is the strongest candidate in the primary. We do make that mistake at times, and we didn't lose everything overnight. We're not going to get it back overnight, and moving to the right is a good thing. I've been pleasantly surprised so far with a number of things that Mark Kirk has done. Certainly in comparison to what we would have had, and so we are better than where we were a year ago. So when it comes to Washington, let's just look at, again, who can win in all these races, congressional races, legislative races, and in Washington.